Hi, and welcome to the Virgin River Cafe Rewatch podcast. Good morning, Gigi.
Hello, Tracy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
This is the halfway point. After this episode, because there's 12
hmm
episodes in season 4, they a little 2 bonus ones for this
Well, it's
season.
always nice to have the extra.
I know. Season 4 and season 5 both have 12 episodes, and unfortunately they went back to 10 for 6. We don't know about 7 yet, so we'll see. But after we finish this episode, then we're halfway through. It's exciting.
Woohoo! Yeah.
So what's your caffeinated beverage today?
My caffeinated beverage today is green tea.
Oh,
I was
nice.
feeling a little, zen, so I'm having some green tea. So that's
Nice.
that's my beverage of choice. So, and it does have caffeine in it. Not
Yes.
as much as my coffee, but
No,
it
definitely
does have
not.
caffeine.
Funny enough, I'm having tea today too. I don't know why. I just felt like tea, and I like this oolong tea that I have. That's so yummy. It kind of has a little
hmm
cinnamony
Okay.
flavor to it. It's really good, and it's hot. I know.
And
It's
this
like, what's wrong
explains
with me?
everything.
What's wrong with me? Is there something wrong with me because I'm drinking a hot drink? I don't know. Just
Exactly.
it's been a weird week, so I thought I'd just like end the weirdness with a weird drink for me. So
Mhm.
what are you gonna
Okay.
do?
Well, go.
Tea for
We're
both
gonna
of
go
us
with the
today.
flow, as they
Caffeine,
say.
caffeine any way we can get it, right? I may
That's
wind
right.
up
That's
needing. I
right.
have a feeling I may wind up needing an iced coffee later. It's.
Hey, that's all good.
I see that in my future. It wouldn't be. It wouldn't be unheard of for me to have an iced coffee at like
Well,
around 3 when
that's all
I'm
right.
like needing it.
That's all right. You need that. You need that get up and go boost.
Oh, it's been that kind of week. So yeah. It probably,
Hey,
probably.
I can relate. Mine's is not as bad as yours,
Yeah,
but
it's okay. It's all
it's
right. We're
interesting.
getting through it. We're getting through it.
Yes, we are.
All right, well, let's get
Yeah.
started.
Okay, so we are in season 4, episode 6. All's fair.
This is a really
Woohoo.
fun episode. This is the one with the Renaissance Fair. So it says the
Mm.
Renaissance Fair kicks off. Mel worries about Jack after a familiar face triggers painful memories. Denny watches Lizzie and Ricky perform. So this
Mm.
should be fun. The Renaissance Fair one was always fun. I mean, I bet just from the amount of preparation this episode had to entail. I mean, they to go on location for them is
There's
a
a lot
big
of
deal.
extras.
There's a lot of
Yeah,
extras. There's a lot
and you know, and there's a lot of
costumes.
extras. Yeah.
I mean, it's a real. I mean, it's like as if you were to just go to it's like you went to the Renaissance Fair. It's the same thing, but that's a
Exactly.
lot. That's a lot
hmm
of like you said, extras. There's a lot of costumes. There's a lot of props. There's just
hmm
and they don't go on location except for the basic normal places like when they go off like the lumberjack games and those are big productions, so this is a big production episode, and I'm sure this one took a little longer
Yeah.
just due to all the prep, but such a fun episode.
hmm
So it's the Renaissance Fair. It's something that they do annually, and we start off with just going through the entrance with all the people. There's fire flamethrowers, and we have the what do they call that? The guys,
The iron.
the ironsmith. Is it the
Um.
ironsmith?
Oh yeah.
The guys
The
that make the
yeah,
horseshoes and
the
the knives and
horseshoes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
hmm
and I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it's called. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
But they have
It's
all
it,
these
yeah.
people doing all their roasted chestnuts, and they've got like fortune tellers at archery, of course. That's a common thing. And then we see Mel, and she just looks adorable with her little, almost like
Lovely. Yes.
Cinderella outfit, almost like you pulled her right out of Beauty and the Beast. And the guy who's
hmm
breathing fire does this big flame of fire, and it makes her jump, and she jumps right into Jack. And he comes on. Now, we know that normally Martin Henderson has a New Zealand accent, but on the
That's
show he
true.
has a no accent. It's funny in California because most shows are filmed in California. I don't know where people are in the world. At least here in the US, it's funny that since so many shows are filmed in California and a lot of the people tend to, unless they're on a specific show that has a specific accent, like the Southern accent or Texas or New York or
Or New
certain
York.
place. Yeah, very distinct Boston, a lot of very
Hmm.
distinct places, but they call kind of California as the no accent because so
Yeah.
many shows are here that people tend to, they don't sound like they're from anywhere. So it's like I don't know. That's I've always heard that it's like the no accent.
It's considered the American
Yeah,
accent.
it's like generic.
It's generic American accent. Yes.
So
So.
his New Zealand only slips out every one when he's very emotional. It slips out every once in a while, or certain words will slip out once in a
Hmm.
while. But he puts on this accent. I don't know if it's like medieval, like a little English, a little something, and
Hmm.
it's just so funny. And so when she hears it, she's like, "Oh my," because it's just adorable. So she bumps into him when she sees the fire flame, and then she's like, "Oh," and they're laughing at each other, and he's like, "No, no, it is I who must apologize, fair maiden," and he's doing it in the accent, and it's just like, she, her reaction is like, "Oh my," and she kind of looks him up and down, and he looks
Hmm.
like a knight. I mean, he's got the medal, he's got the boots and the vest and the shoulder pads, and then he's like a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And
Hmm.
she's like,
Yes, he
"Wow."
is decked out.
Right? She's like, "Wow." And he's like, "Huh?" And she goes, "Well, is it the leather or the metal?" And she's like, "Oh, it's both." Which we all get. He's like, "You like that?" And she's like, "Oh, yes." And he goes, "You, on the other hand, and of course he does it with the accent, be still my beating heart." It's just so cute. The two of them. She's like, "What, this old thing?" And she's like, "Oh, you're the fairest maiden in the land." And so, like, they're in the middle of the whole fair, just like kissing. It's really cute. The two of them. It's like, it's
Making
nice
out.
to have a nice, happy moment. And I guess he got up
But as we
early.
know, it's always short
Oh,
lived.
well, of course, because happiness lasts about 2.5 minutes and then tragedy must follow up. So I guess he had gotten up
Uh,
super early to do things for the fair, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, She's like, "I was sorry, I was asleep when you got home last night," and then she's like, "Oh, that's okay, but I was surprised when I woke up and you were gone." And but him and Preacher, of course, have to get up early to get the tavern ready, and with their conversation. Remember their conversation? Remember our friends in Virgin River had a little conversation yesterday about why he doesn't want to know who the baby daddy is. I guess
mm-hmm.
she was feeling like he was maybe avoiding her, and that,
Avoiding her.
right, it wasn't. He just he got home late, and then he had to get up early, and they just didn't get a chance to talk. And so he reassured her it wasn't that. He's just got a busy day, and they're okay, and they reassure each other. And he's like, "I don't want to fight." And she's like looking at him like, "Just because we don't agree on something doesn't mean it has to be a fight." I mean, they have different views, which they will talk about. They will work it out eventually. But and he's like, he's learning about this whole relationship thing, how to be in a relationship,
Hmm.
because most recent his relationship, and I'm doing air quotes when I say that, was with Charmaine, which we all clearly know that was not a relationship.
No,
So this,
that was booty calls.
yeah, I mean, this is different. This is give and
Those were
take. This
booty
is
calls.
taking other person's feelings into consideration, thinking about the other, I mean, things that he didn't
Hmm.
clearly need to do at all when he was with
Yep.
Charmaine, at least not in any big sense that really mattered. I mean, he, of course,
Uh,
was a caring person, but not to the extent that they're in an actual relationship. So it looks like Muriel is the person they have to go find. So they have to go sign in with Muriel. And
mhm.
as they're walking, cute, holding hands, walking through, and Muriel is talking to a young man, and she is all done up. I mean, she has
She's
got
dressed. She's dressed.
to the nines.
Let's speak quote properly. She's dressed Queen Elizabeth the First.
Oh,
That is who she's dressed as. Yeah,
very nice.
that
Thank you
is
for
who.
that.
That is the quote unquote photo that we have in our history books of Queen Elizabeth the First,
And you would
who
know
is a
that. I would
very
not know that.
strong and dominant.
Nice. I could see that for her. And the red hair, I mean, she is done up. Like she's to the
Oh yeah,
nines. And so she's talking to this young man, and she's like, oh, you need to stick around. It's, this is for this big, part of the show. There's a show, and it's the festival's biggest moneymaker. And so the two of them are chatting, and he's like, sure. And then she sees Jack and Mel, and she's like, oh, look, there's Jack now. And they're like, hey, Muriel. And she goes, well, Mel's like, we're ready to sign in for our shifts. She said that she's at the med tent, obviously, and Jack is at the tavern. And Muriel's like, yeah, but you guys are late, but I'll forgive you. I guess at least as long as people show up. So she turns to this young man that she's been talking to, and she's like, so Tim, this is Jack Sheridan. And she looks at Jack, and she's like, he's been waiting for you to arrive. And Jack's looking at him like, okay. And he goes, Tim Lonergan. And the look on Jack's face, it's almost like shock.
Mm-hmm.
Shock. And he's like, oh, you're Chris's brother. And he's like, wow, you look a lot like him. And he's in such shock that he doesn't even introduce Mel. Like, that's how she kind of chimes in, and she's like, hi, my name's Mel Monroe. Nice to meet you. And he kind of looks at Jack, and he was like, it's an honor to meet you in person. Jack is just floored.
Mm-hmm.
Deer in headlights.
It's shell shock.
Yeah.
Is what it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, it's honor to meet you. And he's like, yep, same. What brings you to the fair? Because it's just weird that he would be there. I mean, randomly, like, he's not dressed up. He's just swinging by. Yeah. And he's like, oh, actually, I'm on my way to Oregon. And I went to the bar. I saw your sign, said you were here. And he goes, you came to see me? And he goes, well, yeah, I actually have something for you. And he's like, can we, and Mel's like, I'll just wait for you over here. So she's chatting with Muriel, and Jack walks to the side with this Tim guy, and Tim pulls this letter out of his jacket, and he hands it to Jack. And Jack's like, what is this? And he's like, it's a letter Chris wrote my parents right before he was killed. And Jack's very apprehensive, and he's like, I was cleaning out the garage. I found it in the bottom of my mom's jewelry box, and the night you called, remember he recently called looking for my mom and dad? He goes, I realized how much guilt you were still holding. And he goes, yeah, because I told you I'd bring him home. And he goes, I wanted you to hear this from me. Chris would not have blamed you, and neither does my family. And he goes, I thought maybe reading this letter might help you let go of some of that. And Jack's like, it's nice of you to bring it to me in person, and thank you. I mean, he's just like staring at him and like can't even believe it. And he goes, wow. He goes, I can't get over how similar you guys look. Because apparently when they show
siblings
flashbacks, they did pick actors that looked very similar. So that was kind of cool. And Tim is like, I was pretty young when he enlisted, and, I don't remember much. And he goes, he used to call me the Tim Man, and he would pretend to put oil on me, kind of like from The Wizard of Oz. And Jack laughs, and he was like, yeah, he was funny as hell. He was a good guy. He was honest and super loyal. And whenever things got really bad, he'd just tell a joke and cut the tension in half. Everybody loved him. And Tim is like, listen, Jack, from the bottom of my heart, I hope this letter helps you find some peace. Because, I mean, it's still getting at him. And Jack, he thanks him, and Tim goes on his way. Now, Mel, who is watching from the sidelines, waiting for the second this guy walks away so she can swoop in and check on Jack, because he does not look okay. And she walks up very concerned. And she's like, hey. And he almost looks like he's going to cry. And she's like, are you okay? And he was like, yeah, I'm fine. Because you know him. He's always fine. Everything is fine. Everybody's good. And she goes, honey, what did he want? And she's like, well, he gave me a letter that Chris wrote before he died, and thought that it might help me feel better. And he's trying to like brush it off like it's not a big deal. Obviously, it's a really big deal, but he's, Jack, he plays it off like everything's good. And she's like, well, did you read it? And he's like, no, not yet. And she's like, well, why don't we just go home? Like, she's ready to like can the whole day, and he was like, no. She goes, we can sit together, or you can be alone. Like, she just wants to take care of him because she sees this affected him more than he's letting on. Yeah. And he's like, I gotta do the tavern with Preach, and I got a duel this afternoon. She's like, I know, babe, but we can deal with this. And she's like, no, your feelings are more important. And he's like, I'm fine. I'm good. She doesn't believe him. She's like, you are.
He's Mr. Macho.
I know. And then he's like, it's fine. I'm good. I'll catch up with you later. And she's looking at him like, yeah, he's not okay.
Yeah.
And now she's going to worry about him the
from
entire
okay.
day.
She is.
Because that's what she's going to
Of
do.
course
Now,
she is.
beautiful scenery. This is a waterfall. I don't think I've seen this particular shot before. Amazing waterfall with a rainbow and beautiful. So we're back at the Renaissance Fair. And now we see, oh my gosh, we see Hope and Doc. Now, really, these two? One is a jester. Doc decides he's going to be a court jester. And Hope, what is she? She has a musical instrument.
Yes.
Like, what is her role?
She is
What do they call that? Like a musician? Would you say Hope's a musician?
She's a musician, as such. Mm-hmm.
And she's like, she
yes.
asked Doc, she's like, can I have my tabor pipe? And he's looking at her like she has 6 heads.
Like she's lost.
He's like, what's a tabor pipe? And she's like, the one I gave you to put in your pocket so I wouldn't forget it. Of course, like looking at him like, of course. And he's like, oh, sorry, I must have left it at the house. And she's like, well, can you drive back and get it? And he's like, do you really need it? And she's like, well, how are people to know that I'm a musician if I don't have an instrument? Good Lord. And she's like, well, there's got to be a mandolin or lyre around here somewhere. And he's like, plus, I don't want to drive all the way back to the house. It's like 15 minutes each way. She's like, Vernon, what is up with you today? You're wound tighter than a 10-day clock. Good Lord. And he's like, I don't think we should get into it here.
Don't you love the Southern?
Oh I know. They're so funny with all their funny little sayings that either you have to be older or from the South to like know what they mean or to have any like, oh yeah, that's funny. Like people be like, that's weird. Because if you're really young, you're probably like, that's weird. Yeah. Now they're supposed to meet up with Denny. So they're looking for Denny because remember, Hope has not met him yet. She's only heard about him.
No, she hasn't.
And he's like, and I want his first impression of you to be positive. And she's like, oh, I'll make sure I'm my usual delightful self.
Good luck with that.
Right? And then she remembers something he said. She goes, wait a minute. Get into what? What do we not want to get into right now? He goes, you really want to know? She's like, well, I asked. He goes, I know you canceled your neurologist appointment. She's like, I told you. Muriel doesn't know what she's talking about. And he's like, I'm a doctor. I have my own sources. And he's pissed. He's like, why did you lie to me? She goes, because I didn't want to go. And they're like arguing in the middle of the Renaissance Fair. She's like, and I'm tired of you telling me what to do. He's like, with you, it's just a one-way street. She's like, what's that supposed to mean? He goes, you have no trouble bossing me or anyone else around. But you can't even follow doctor's orders.
Oh, boy.
And then he's like, oh, hey, Denny. Totally changes his whole personality in like a hot second. It's kind of like, we're going to put a pin in that for now, and let's just pretend to be happy. And Denny walks up. He goes, Denny, how are you, son? And he's like, great, thanks. And she introduces himself, gives him a hug. Hi, I'm Hope. It's good to finally meet you. He goes, you two, Doc's told me a ton of nice stuff about you. And she goes, well, clearly you've got the Mullins charm. So, and she asks him how he's been enjoying himself in Virgin River. And he's like, it's incredible. Everyone is so friendly and the hiking is awesome. She goes, I've been thinking at night in the clinic, it must get a little hot, because somebody refuses to upgrade the air conditioning system. And he's like, well, it wasn't that bad. And she's like, are you waking up sweating? And she goes, yeah, that's what I thought because of the look on his face. She goes, there's no reason for you to be miserable when you can stay with us at the house. Now, remember him and Hope talked about this? And she was like, I don't want anybody in my house. I want to be left alone. It's like all of a sudden now she's doing a complete 180. Very weird.
Oh, well, you know why?
Let's avoid Doc at all costs.
No, part of it is that she's trying to avoid Vernon arguing with her about
That's what I mean. She wants to avoid him at all costs to like be able to be alone with him and have conversation. Yeah. So if Denny's around, what a great distraction.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. And he's looking at
Yeah.
Hope and looking at Denny and then Denny's like, "Are you sure?" And she's like, "Absolutely. Right, Vernon?" And he's like, "Oh, of course. Fabulous." He goes, "We'll leave a key under the mat so you can
Poor
come and go."
Vernon.
Oh my gosh. And he's like, "That's so generous of you."
Vernon looks like a deer in headlights, like
Well,
you
he's
said,
like,
because he's like, what the hell
"Really?"
just happened?
Yeah. Now, of course,
Mm-hmm.
Hope, who has to milk this for all she's worth, she's like, "I think you'll find our home to be a bastion of
Mm-hmm.
peace and tranquility." Yeah, with Vernon on his best behavior watching his P's and Q's with Denny around, she's gonna feel a lot better.
Oh, are you?
Oh my. And he's just
Mm.
laughing at her like,
Oh,
"You're a
yes.
weirdo."
Well,
Then
he's looking
oh
at her
gosh.
like that. You're not playing.
Yeah. That's no. You're weird. Now Nick walks up and he was like to Denny, he goes, "Hey, Muriel's looking for you. You know,
But she's
everybody's
using
got a
Denny
ship."
as an excuse to get out of all the argument.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. So he's gonna check in with them later, and off he goes. And Doc is looking and he goes, "What the hell was that?" She's like, "Me calling a truce." Oh my goodness. So now we see Bert, who just purchased a hat from Liddy, who is a little stand
Our
selling hats.
favorite character.
Yep. So Bree's looking for a
Oh,
Henry VIII hat for Brady.
oh,
And he's
great.
like, "How do you know what that guy wore?" And he goes, "Because I was researching Anne Boleyn."
That seems apropos considering that she's dressed like Anne Boleyn. And you can tell that she's dressed like Anne Boleyn partly because around her neck is the pearls with the big B, which is one of the few photos they have of Anne Boleyn before she got her head chopped off.
Ah, I
And
wouldn't have known
also,
that. I
it's
don't
one
know
of
my
the
history.
and it's also one of the few pieces that was bequeathed to her daughter, who then in turn became Queen Elizabeth I.
Oh, look at that. See, I don't know anything about English history. So thank you. I would not have known that. I didn't see that necklace
That's
until
okay.
you pointed it out. See? I mean, my
Yes,
Maya
it's
listens to musicals, the one Six, which is about all of the
yes,
and the songs in that are
all of his wives.
hilarious. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's the only reference I have of anything to do with Henry VIII and all of his wives, and yeah, really funny.
Yep. So
Um,
it's funny because he didn't think a woman could rule, and then once he did have a son who only lived for till into his, I think it was his teens or early teens, he
mhm.
died, and the one child he didn't think would rule because he just tried to divorce her mother was Queen Elizabeth I, who was considered one of the greatest English rulers of
Oh,
all time and lived a very long life.
wow.
Who lived long, not as long as Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth II, but she lived a. She was quite. She was also called the Virgin Queen. So
Man, those women,
um,
they got some good
as
genes.
well. But anyway, just short little history lesson
Thank you.
there.
Thank
Yes,
you.
they do.
So, Bree decided that when she
Anyway,
was researching Anne Boleyn, and that's why he needed a Henry VIII hat to go with her costume. So they matchy matchy. And he's like, "Are you sure
it's
you
a
want
good
me to
thing.
play the guy who cut your head off?" And she's like, "Just put it on." He goes, "All right, but I'm only doing this for you." And so he puts it on, and she's like, "Ugh." And he's like, "I look ridiculous." She's like, "I think you look quite dashing." So they decide to purchase it, and Liddy's like, "Brave choice, Lady Boleyn." So now they're off to the tavern, and he's like, "Maybe a few drinks will help me forget about this hat." She goes, "No, no, no, we're not going for drinks." Because I told Jack that we'd stop by and show him our costumes. And obviously, that's not a good idea because Brady and Jack aren't still getting along. So Brady's like, "You know what? Why don't you go ahead and I'll just hang out here?" Because he does not. No, that's not a good idea. And he's like, "I just don't want to see him." And she's, of course, curious why. And he goes, "Well, he came by my work last night, got kind of pissed off." And she's like, "Well, I'm going to need you to be a little more specific." He goes, "Look, he wanted to know what happened the night of the shooting, and I told him everything. But he kept pushing and pushing and pushing. like I was holding back. And she's like, well, he's stressed. And he goes, yeah, everyone's stressed about something. It's like, dude, don't take it out on me. He goes, but Brady, he's my brother. He goes, if you guys can't be around one another, that's going to be a problem for me. It's like Brady's probably thinking, then I guess we have a problem. He goes, look, ever since I got back from Iraq, I have been trying to get him to respect me. No matter what I do, he still treats me like some dumb kid. So I guess they're sort of going to agree to disagree. So now we've got Preacher and Jack are at the tavern. They're setting it up. Ricky's there to help, and Hannah. And they are very surprised that Ricky shows up. Everyone looks so good. It's so cool that everybody dressed
looks
up.
So good.
They do. Even Ricky. And they were joking with him because last year, I guess he wore a ball cap and shorts. But this year, he decided to go all out. Oh, how far he's come. So then, and Mike, Mike shows up and he goes, are you guys open? He looks like Robin Hood. He's like, are you guys open or what? He goes, oh, constable, looking for a drink? He goes, it's my day off. So they're like, just give us 5 minutes and the kegs will be ready. And of course, a very common thing, like I always think of The Princess Bride, they go, as you wish. Even Preacher, he's got a crown on.
Right. I don't know if Preacher is a representation of one of Shakespeare's plays.
I think everyone is inspired by something. Sure if he's
Hamlet or
could be
something. I don't know, but
they all look good. They all did a good job.
Look good.
So Preacher's questioning Ricky, like, why? What's with the outfit? Like, this is not usually how you would dress here, And he's like, oh, me and Lizzie are doing a scene together. And they look at him like, oh. And Hannah's like, yeah, looking good there, Romeo, because they're Romeo and Juliet. And so Preacher, of course, has to ask because, everybody's in everybody else's business. He goes, so things are heating up between you two?
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, oh, no. But at least she's talking to me. I guess that's better than nothing, right? And Preacher's like, well, you know what they say. Slow and steady wins the race. And Jack's like, don't listen to him. You got to be bold. You got to tell her how you feel. And he goes, you guys are confusing me. He goes, well, keep it simple. Just go grab another box of stuff. So they're unpacking and getting ready for the day. And
he's just trying to keep his head above water.
I know. And Preacher's looking at Jack like, that dude's not right. He goes, is something bothering you? And he's like, I'm all right. And he's like, what is it? Like, he knows something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And Jack is like, Lonergan's brother, Tim. And he's like, yeah. He goes, he's here. And Preacher's like, at the fair? And he goes, yeah. He goes, he wanted to give me a letter that Chris had written to his parents. And Preacher's like, oh, man, that's heavy. How you feeling? Like, checking in with him. And Jack's like, it's eerie. Like his demeanor reminded me of Chris. And Preacher's like, yeah, I bet. He goes, if you want to bail, I can totally handle things here. And of course, Jack, no, I'm fine. I'll shake it off. It'll be great. Of course, Preacher's very skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my. So now we're at the med tent.
Of course he is.
We're at the med tent, and Mel is there, and she's looking at Doc, who just walked in, and he is looking like he's a little off. And she's like, are you okay? And she's like, what's wrong? He goes, Hope. She canceled her neurologist appointment the other day and lied about it. And he's still pissed. And she's like, oh, no. He goes, and she's being so damn difficult about following up her care. And Mel's like, well, I mean, you know how independent Hope is. It's hard for her to rely on someone when she's not used to it. And he's like,
amen.
Someone? I'm not just someone. I'm her husband. But keep in mind, dude, you haven't been her husband for 20 years. All of a sudden you're together. It's a little weird. And of course, Mel, with the gotta empathize. She's like, I know. I get it. Which is why she's probably taken all of her frustrations out on you. And he's like, well, no good deed goes unpunished. And so then, remember the end of the last episode, Mel caught Denny dipping into the medicine cabinet.
Yes.
And she's very, she doesn't want to rock the boat with Doc, but she's got to find out about that. So she decides to ask him. She's like,
yep.
is it possible that you might have left the drug cabinet open yesterday? And he's like, no, I wasn't even there, but, check with Cameron. She's like, right, great. So now we're at the bakery truck, and Tara comes and purchases something. Lizzie's working there. They also have big tables set up in front of it, and all these bakery items and pies and bread and everything else. It looks so yummy, all their goodies. So Denny shows up. He runs into Lizzie, and he's like, hey, guess what? Doc and Hope just invited me to stay at their place. And he's like, well, it was mostly Hope, and she's not happy with him. She's like, cool, like, do you want to order something? And he's like, yeah, give me a couple slices of almond cake. And so she starts wrapping it up, and he's like, are you excited? Your performance, you and Ricky? And she was like, I'm nervous. He's like, you're going to do great. I'm going to be rooting for you. And she's like, so you're going to watch? And he's like, of course, why wouldn't I? She goes, I don't know. I thought you weren't into Shakespeare. And he's like, well, why would you think that? And she's like, well, I don't know. It's like he didn't want to perform it. It doesn't mean he doesn't want to watch it. I mean, that's a pretty stretch. And he's like, well, thanks for the tarts and break a leg.
But she doesn't take rejection.
Not well at all.
Well, the thing is, she's used to getting her own way. So
all
if you tell her no, she turns around
pout.
and acts like a spoiled 2-year-old.
Yeah, she's going to pout about it, for sure. So off he goes with his tarts. And she's like confused, like, you don't want to be in it, but you're okay to watch it? Like, weird.
And I don't understand how she doesn't get that.
No, but, it's Lizzie. She's young. What are you going to do? So
she's just a spoiled brat is what she is.
Yeah, pretty much. So Hope and Preacher run into each other, and Hope she says that she saw this little Lear at the stand over there, and now she looks like a musician. She says, the guy said I could use it all day. And so Preacher says, I'll see you at the duel. And just as Preacher is walking back to the tavern, he runs into Julia. And he's like, oh, I'm glad you could make it. And he's like, you guys look great. And she's got a young girl with her. And she's like, thank you. So do you. She's dressed up. The girl's dressed up. Everyone's dressed up, even like the participants, not just people that are working. And he goes, Preacher, this is my niece, Maya. She goes, this is my friend, Preacher. And he's like, pleased to meet you, Maya. Are you having fun? She's like, can I have my phone back? And Julia's like, I thought we agreed that you're not going to have your phone. She goes, I need to call my mom. And she kind of gives her a look. Julia hands her the phone. And she goes, where's the bathroom? And Preacher points right over there. And so she takes off. He goes, I'm sorry. We were just over at archery. And she's frustrated. I guess, she was feeling a little down because she wasn't doing very good. And Preacher's like, well, most people don't hit it on their first try. She goes, yeah, but she's been taking lessons and she expected to do better. And she's obsessed with the Hunger Games. And Preacher's like, I'm a pretty good shot. Maybe I could help. And she's like, really? Well, if I could convince her to go back and try again, that would be very heroic of you. And he goes, oh, hero to your rescue. So he's like, just meet me back here in an hour.
That's our Preacher.
Yep. So we're back at the med tent, and looks like Doc is fixing somebody up that hurt themselves. And Cameron shows up. Now he's got tea for Mel and coffee for Doc. And he's like, oh, that was very thoughtful of you, Cameron. And so Cameron, of course, he chimes in. So did we solve the mystery behind the unlocked drug cabinet? And Mel shoots him a look like, you probably shouldn't have said anything. Just as Doc's kind of like gonna question that, Nick walks in and he's like, there's an emergency at the Maypole. Of course, they think it's a medical emergency, so everyone's like, what? And Nick, he's so funny. He's like, well, that's what Muriel said anyway. He's like, apparently, if nobody's dancing, and then as she put it, the festival cannot be festive. And just in order to get out of there so that they don't have to talk about what's going on with the drug cabinet, Mel chimes in and she's like, me and Cameron, we'll be right there. We'll take care of it. And Doc is looking at them. It's like, the Queen says it's an emergency. We got to go. You're good, right, Doc? And she like gives him a thumbs up and off they go before they even give him a chance to say a word.
He seems to be having a lot of that problem
Right?
today.
Yeah. And Cameron is like, are you big into maypole dancing? And she's like, oh, God, no. She goes, I just cannot have a drug conversation with Doc right now. He's like, why not? He goes, well, last night when I went to the clinic, Denny was going through the drug cabinet. And he goes, well, we have scheduled 2 drugs in there. And what was he doing? And he goes, I don't know. He said he was looking for aspirin, but I don't know. And he goes, and the door was unlocked? He goes, but we always lock it. She's like, I know, exactly. And so she's like, well, the best case scenario is that one of us accidentally left it open. Or, as Karen chimes in, Denny broke into the cabinet and lied about it. Ugh, and they're both like, let's hope it's not that. He goes, oh, and he asked me not to tell Doc about it. And Cameron's like, yeah, that's not a very good idea. She's like, I know. She goes, well, what if I tell Doc and then Denny happens to be telling the truth and then I ruin their relationship? And he goes, wow, but if he's lying, then Doc deserves to know. I mean, she looks so distraught. She's like, yeah, I guess. And so they're just kind of showing different pieces and parts of the Renaissance Fair. Now there's a performance on the stage, which is the two of these two doing this performance is hilarious.
It's hysterical.
Nick is laying on the ground and Connie is like holding him. And she's like, a Roman by a Roman valiantly vanquished. Like, and my spirit is going. I can no more. And everybody's like, I mean, they're just going on. And I mean, they're very into it. They're very like, oh my gosh. And everybody is like laughing. Like they're trying to be serious, but it's kind of hilarious. Shall I abide into this dull world? And he's shaking like he's dying. And Connie is very dramatic in his face, just yelling, and he's groaning like he's dying, and then she's pretending to sob. And everybody claps. What a performance. Two of them waving to everybody. So funny. Oh, so now we're at the maypole, and Muriel's making sure everyone is positioned correctly. And Cameron's like, okay, Muriel came to me. She said, you're clockwise, I'm counterclockwise. Means nothing to me. No idea what she's talking about.
He has no idea what that means.
And Mel is like, no. And he's like, He goes, so I haven't done this since grade school, but the basic premise is over under. And he's looking at her like she's got speaking Swahili. And she's like, that doesn't help me. He goes, okay. So on the over count, you're going to go over me, right? So she's trying to show him, okay, like that. And then you're going to go under that ribbon and you're just going to weave in and out. And she's like, does that make sense? And he's like, it's like, you'll be fine. Just follow along. It's fine. And Muriel does the count. And so then he starts and they have enough people to do it. All the spots are filled. He's going over and Muriel's yelling, skip, Cameron. And he's like, yeah, uh-huh. And then she's like, now slow down. Like she's giving a lot of orders. But they seem to be doing okay. And he's almost tripping, but they're laughing. They're having a good time. So she goes, skip, skip. There you go. And Cameron's like, skip, skip. Okay. And she's like, you did it. You're doing a great job. So at least she's being encouraging. Bree is purchasing some cotton candy. She brings it over to Brady. And she's like, do you think you're too old for cotton candy? He goes, oh, it's not cotton candy. She's like, it's spun sugar. And he's like, well, what's the difference? She goes, the name on the sign. She's like, I can't believe you've never had cotton candy before. He goes, well, my parents never took me anywhere when I was a kid. And she's like, oh, that makes me sad. And he's like, oh, you've got something. Oh, wait, don't move, on her face. And he kisses her because he's going to kiss it off of her, of course. He goes, oh, you taste like sugar. And he goes, oh, that's because I'm sweet. It's like, really? In the middle of the fair? Then his phone rings. And he looks at it and he's like, ugh, it's Calvin. He's like, what does he want? And it's a text message. And it says, meet him at Emerald Lumber at 4 p.m. He goes, well, he wants to meet up. And she's like, good. That's a good sign. Because remember, they're working together now. They're going to flush him out. They're going to figure out what's going on. She goes, this is your chance to make him think that you're all in. And he goes, yeah, well, I still got a little time. What else do you want to do? And she's like, I want to go see the baby goats. I want to take a picture of the one wearing pajamas. He goes, oh, no, please. That freaks me out when people dress animals in clothes. I don't even think they'd
I
have
agree.
baby goats there. I mean, that just seems a little odd, but okay.
Well, it's probably part of the petting zoo for the kids,
Probably. So,
but it's not necessary to dress up the poor
well,
animals.
yeah. And he's like, it's creepy. She goes, no, it's not. It keeps them warm. It's like, whatever.
God
They
gave
have
them,
fur. They have fur. They don't need pajamas.
exactly. They don't need clothes.
No. So we're back at the bakery truck, and Connie and Hope are there, and Hope is like, I don't want to go to the doctor, and I have the right not to go. And Connie's like, sounds like he's more mad about the lying than you're not going. She's like, trust me, if I'd have been honest with him, it would not have been a fight. And Connie's like, well, I don't have the energy that I used to have. She's like, sometimes I need to take the path of least resistance. She goes, well, have you told Doc the way you feel? She's like, he knows, or at least he should know. And Connie's like, ever since Doc found out that you were in the hospital, he has been worried sick about you. He thought he was going to lose you, and he was devastated. And she's like, still, that doesn't give him the right to control me. She kind of looks her up and down. She's like, I think you're still angry with Doc because he didn't tell you about Lily. And if that's the reason, you should be mad at Liddy and Muriel and Joellen and me. Because remember, they didn't tell her either.
That's true.
And now she's like second guessing it. She goes, because that's how Lily wanted it. So now Hope is like, why? Connie's like, it doesn't matter why. And Hope is like, you don't understand. I didn't know that the last time that I saw Lily would be the last time. And Hope is like, I feel like I was robbed. And Connie's like, she agrees with her. She's like, yeah, you were. But that's not Doc's fault. She goes, and if you don't stop blaming him, your relationship will not survive. For somebody who hasn't been married, and she gives good advice. Connie's a smart lady. And she's really making Hope think.
For her also Connie is an observer.
Yes.
If you notice that about Connie.
Oh, yeah.
Connie is an observer of people, and she reads people really well.
She does.
So if she keeps this up, she's gonna push a Doc right into Miriam's arms.
Oh, yeah. So Mel shows up at the tavern to check on Jack. And he's like, how was the maypole? And she's like, it was really fun. I wish you'd have been there. And he's like, well, there's always next year. And he's just drinking a beer. And she's like, how are you doing? He goes, oh, good. Good as gold. And she's like, can I take you home now? And he's like, you're not having a good time? She's like, no, I'm worried about you. He goes, being in a place that's loud and crowded, it's really stressful. And he goes, I'm used to loud and crowd. I own a bar, remember? And she's like, Jack, come on. Like, she's really worried. And he's like, what? She goes, what's going on? What's going on in your head? And, of course, he's kind of irritated that she keeps kind of bugging him about this. And she's like, look, I know that seeing Tim was really upsetting for you. And he just pours himself another drink. And he goes, well, yeah, I was surprised to see him. And she's like, and he goes, and what? I'm not sure what else you want me to say. He goes, I'm totally fine, as he continues to drink more beer. And she's like, I can't tell if you're lying to me or to yourself. And Hannah pops over. She's like, Jack, we need more mulled wine. I mean, he's got to get back to work. And he's like, mulled wine, duty calls. And she's kind of like, fine, whatever. And she takes off. Now, Preacher kept his promise, and he is showing Julia's niece how to shoot an archery. So he gave her a couple pointers, and then he's like, all right, you want to try? You got this. Like, trying to be encouraging. Hopefully, she'll do better. She gives it a shot. It's a little off, and he was like, he's like, he's giving her more pointers. Don't be afraid to pull the string all the way back. So he kind of shows her. He demonstrates, and he gets it right in the center. And she's like, wow. And he goes, all right, come on. And so he sets her up again. One more try. A little more instruction. And he's like, so when you pull back, inhale, and then exhale on the release. And so she does that. She aims, and she hits a really good close one toward the middle. You see? That's better. You want to try it? Now she's happy. Now, before she was like a grumpy teenager. But now she's good. So that was nice of him to help her out. So now Muriel is doing some kind of performance. I mean, she's very animated. She's like, "Stop my mouth." I mean, everybody's laughing and clapping for her. And then there's a flamethrower, and they have a
And
special
then
presentation.
tongues, and that's called the tongues crier.
Yes, the town crier. That's Nick.
And they are the ones that come out.
Nick is a good town crier.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of hot air. He's like, tickets are now being sold for the Knight's Duel, which is like a big performance. And he's got this little parchment. This place, they really did a good job. They have signs everywhere and booths everywhere. And so we have Ricky and Lizzie, and they're doing their Romeo and Juliet performance on the stage. And they have to do this thing where they put their palms together and they're remembering all of their words. Everyone's there watching. They have to hold hands. And they're saying their lines, which he practiced. And then they weren't supposed to kiss. Remember, they weren't sure about the kiss, but she leans in and gives him a kiss. And then they finish it and they take a bow.
Mm-hmm.
They do a nice job. It wasn't too weird. And she actually, before they even leave, she's like, "Oh, you were so good. You were like the perfect Romeo." I mean, she just wanted to wear the pretty dress. Really? That was all what it was about. She could have cared less. She just wanted to wear the dress. But everyone is standing up and clapping. Even Denny. Was there watching. And of course Ricky says to Lizzie, he goes, "For the record, you're the one who kissed me." And she's like, "Well, it seemed like they wanted us to." And then he's like, "So are you going to the Knight's Duel?" And she's like, "Okay, I guess so. Then I'll see you there." So he's feeling pretty good. Ricky's feeling pretty good about things. So we're back at the tavern, and Bree runs into Jack, and he was like, "Hey, how's it going?" And he's like, "What is that smell?" And she was like, "Oh, I was overfeeding the baby goats." So she must smell like baby goats. She's like, "Don't worry, I washed my hands." He's like, "I do not think any amount of scrubbing is going to get rid of that smell." So she asked for an ale. So he's going to pour her some. So then, because she can't let anything go, she's like, "Brady told me that you stopped by Emerald Lumber last night." And Jack's like, "Yeah. And I did." And it's like, "Why?" And she's like, "And he said you were condescending." And he's like, "How? All I did was ask him if he remembered anything new." And she's like, "From the night of the shooting." And she actually has to ask him, "Could you try to be a little nicer to him?" And he's like, "Nicer to him? I've done everything for that guy. I gave him a job. I put him up when he had no place else to go. And then he goes and steals from me. And then he works for Calvin." She's like, "Yeah, I get it. I'm not saying you're in the wrong, but he's important to me." It's like, oh, God. And he's trying. So I need for you guys
and the
to be
problem
civil.
with that is, this is a big brother trying to protect
I know.
his baby sister from a bad guy.
And he
as
knows
far
he's
as
trouble.
concerned.
He knows he's trouble.
Oh, hell yes.
It's like, I've already warned you about this guy. And Jack is like, "Yeah, you want us to be civil." He goes, "There's a lot of history there." And Jack's like, "I still don't trust him." And Bree just kind of looks at him, and she doesn't even know what to say at this point. Now we're back at the med tent. Doc's always writing little notes in his notepad. We never know what he really writes, but he's always got his little notepad with him. He's always jotting something down. And we see Hope walk in. Now she's looking like an apology is in order. And she brings him, she goes, "Some kind of medieval marzipan." He goes, "I hate marzipan." She goes, "Well, I tried to get you a bear claw, but, that's a 20th century invention." Gosh. So she sits down in front of him and she's like, "Vernon, I owe you an apology. I've been a little difficult." And he kind of chuckles. She's like, okay, I've been very difficult. And I've realized that I have a lot of anger built up inside of me. Everything was going so well between us, and then Lily died and some drunk idiot screwed up the rest of me. And Doc's like, "Well, sometimes you get dealt a bad hand. That doesn't mean it's okay to take out your frustrations on the people who love you." She's like, I know I haven't been fair to you. My accident, Lily's death, they happened to you too." She's finally acknowledging that. He's like, "The only way that we're going to get through this is UAW." He's like, UAW, and they both start laughing. Us against the world. He goes, "Wow, it's been a long time since I've heard that said." He goes, "I want us to get back there. to us being a team. He goes, you really believe that? Then we need some ground rules. It's not okay for you to lie. She's like, agreed. And you need to take better care of yourself. That includes going to your appointments. She goes, I am going to be a model patient. He goes, and I'm going to hold you to that. He goes, things will get better between us. You'll see. The two of them. And Mel walks in with the two of them having a moment. He's like, I need to talk to Mel for a minute.
At least they're not the only ones to get interrupted.
Right. Interruptions sort of are the flavor. I think it's just no one can ever have a moment without being interrupted.
Exactly.
But at least they patch things up. So things are better between Doc and Hope, which is better.
Yeah.
So Mel comes in and she's like, true. What did you want to talk to me about? And Doc is like, What is all this business about the drug cabinet? Cameron's talking about some mystery. He goes, it's my practice. If something's going on, I need to know about it. And she's like, you're right. You're absolutely right. And she's very apprehensive, but, you know, she's a very honest person, so she's going to be straight with him. It's hard for her to say it, but she goes, I found Denny in the drug cabinet last night. And he said he was looking for aspirin. He goes, Denny, why didn't you tell me about this morning? She goes, I know. I should have. I was going to. And then Denny asked me not to. And I know how excited you've been to get to know him, and I just don't want to ruin that. And then I was really hoping that either you or Cameron had left it open. He goes, I appreciate that you have my best interest at heart, but it's not your job to manage me. And she's like, I know. I'm sorry. I was really just trying to do the right thing. He goes, well, it would have been helpful if you had told me that when that happened, because then Hope invited Denny to stay with us. And I could have stalled until I got to the bottom of this. And Mel's like feeling really bad now because now they're kind of stuck. Now he lives upstairs. And he's like, don't worry, we'll figure it out. Oh my. So more fun things happening at the Renaissance Fair. So there's people doing archery and they're throwing, it's like a ring toss. And now is the big event, the duel. So Muriel comes out, there's horns, two people with horns, and she comes in announcing, at long last, the knight's duel. The whole crowd is there. Everybody in town's there. On one side, we have King John, and that's Preacher. He is your champion 3 years running. And on the other side, we have Sir Sheridan. Audience is booing him. Thumbs down. And he uses guile and cunning to make up for what he lacks in land and title. And they're all laughing at him. And so Muriel does a little dance, and she scurries off the stage, and they go, on guard, Sheridan, King John. And the two of them are doing this, like, artificial duel that I'm sure they had to practice. And Jack does a nice big swing over Preacher's head, and he ducks just in time. He brushes it off his shoulders like not a big deal. And he has a flower, and he hands it to Hope, who's in the audience. And Jack comes, and he's got a flower, and he leans over and hands it to some girl in the audience. 3 different girls, one for each. Just as Preacher comes by, and he uses his sword to tap Preacher on the butt. And they're having a good time. It's a lot of fun. And they do this, like, probably, everyone is like, like, it's obviously practice. But they're really doing a good, facial expressions, like, it's really hard. So funny.
And the audience participation is also very nice.
Oh, yes. Now, Preacher's sword fell, and Jack picks it up, and he tosses it back. And Preacher has to go get it. And just as he does that, someone walks in, and it's Ricky. And it says, oh, so you need your squire to fight your battles for you, do you? And he has this little knife. And Jack... Now Jack is between the two of them, and they're fighting some more, and the audience is oohing and eyeing, and the squire gets down so that when Jack backs up, he actually falls and flips backwards over. So it's like 2 against 1. It's like, oh, they've plotted against him. And they're like, you're a bad man. And he goes, who's the toad now, boy? And he gets the knife, and he's coming up to Ricky, the squire, and he's crawling toward him. And as he's crawling on the ground toward Ricky, in character with the knife and everything, he locks eyes with Tim Lonergan. And right then, he gets a flashback. which is a really bad timing in the middle of a performance. But his flashback goes back
Tell me about it.
to when he was injured, and he's been shot in the back, and he's crawling on the ground. Lonergan is also injured. Jack is crawling over toward Lonergan, and they're both pushed up against a Jeep. And he's telling Lonergan,
a tank, I think.
Yes, they're kind of hiding behind a vehicle, and he's like, "Hang in there, just hang in there. Everything's going to be okay." And Lonergan's just right there with him, and he's scared. He says, and he's like, "I'm not scared," even though he's scared. He says, "I'm not scared." And Jack is right there with him. He goes, "Nothing to be scared of, kid." He goes, and all of a sudden, he's back. Like, Jack is back in the performance, and Ricky, he's got Ricky, he's holding Ricky just like he was holding Lonergan. So Ricky's like, "Jack, that's not your line." And he's trying to like bring him back. He goes, Jack, that's not your line." And Preacher is even like under his breath, "Jack, what are you doing? Jack, like, bring him back." And Jack looks up at Preacher, and everybody's smiling, and everyone's like, "What's going on?" Now Mel is looking at them, looking at Jack, going, "Okay, he's definitely not okay." Like, she can tell. She can tell when he's having a flashback.
Yeah.
And Jack lays down, and Preacher pretends to stab him with the sword. And everybody cheers. And Mel's looking very concerned. So we're behind the scenes. The show is over. They're getting out of their costumes. And Preacher goes up to Jack, because it's just the two of them. And he's like, "Hey, are you okay?" And Jack's like, "I'm not really saying anything." And he goes, "When you went to see Lonergan's parents, did they ever ask why I didn't go?" And Preacher's like, "Yeah." This was like 10 years before. He goes, "Well, what did you tell them?" He goes, "That it was too much for you." And he goes, they never blamed you, not for a second." He goes, "Neither did any of us guys who were with you." And Jack's like, "Yeah, right." And Preacher's like, "I just wish that you could let yourself off the hook, because he has been hanging on to this thing for 10 years. And Jack's like, "I don't know how." And Preacher's like, "That's okay." He goes, "Find someone who can help you." Now, Preacher goes to therapy. He goes to the group. He talks to people. He deals with it. Jack wants to deal with it all by himself, which is clearly not working, because it's only getting worse. It's getting worse.
It is.
So now we've got Lizzie. She's on a bridge, just kind of overlooking the area, and Denny shows up with a little bouquet of flowers for her. How sweet. He's like, "You were an incredible Juliet." She's like, "Thanks." And he's like, "You're super talented. Did you do theater in high school?" And she goes, "Oh, no. That was my first time on stage." And he's like, "Wow." He said, "Well, you've got a spark. You could totally be an actress." She goes, "Oh, I don't have the face for acting." He's like, "Are you being serious? You're beautiful." And she's like, "Denny, if you think I'm so pretty, then why aren't you interested?" He's like, "What?" He goes, "Sometimes you act like you want to be with me, and then you back off." He goes, "No, I am interested. I just can't be with anyone right now." She's like, "Guys say that when they don't want to hurt your feelings." He goes, No, I'm not doing that." It's like very coy. He's like, "I like you. For real." And she's like, "Then why haven't you done anything about it?" He goes, "Because the timing, it's just not right." She's like, "Then why are you here? What's going on?" He goes, "I've tried, but I just can't stop thinking about you." And so she kisses him.
Lord.
Yeah, I know. She gives him a kiss, and then he kisses her back. So clearly they like each other. And guess who just happens to be walking up? And he has a flower for her too. Ricky. He throws his flower down, turns around, and walks away. "You lost your chance, buddy. You had your shot and you blew it. Sorry."
Oh, poor Ricky.
I
love Ricky. I'm sorry.
I know. He's sweet. So it's the end of the evening. We're back at the cabin. Jack has now gotten out of the shower. He's like, "Oh my God, I just feel like I've rinsed off a pound of dirt." And Mel's sitting on the couch, and she's not looking very happy right now. He finishes his drink, and he pours himself another one. He's like, "Do you want anything?" And she's like, "Some water." So he pours her some water. And he's like, "How was the maypole?" And she's like, "We already talked about the maypole at the fair, remember?" And he kind of like winces, like, crap, I'm in the doghouse. He goes, oh, yeah, that's right. I remember now. So he brings her water and he sits down in the chair next to the couch, not with her on the couch. Puts his feet up. They're just sitting there. And she's still worried. She's like, Jack, if you don't want to talk to me about whatever it is, I think you should talk to a therapist. And he's like, somebody that has experience. And he's like, experience? Experience with what? She's like, watching someone you're responsible for bleed out right in front of you, that kind of experience? And she's like, I know. What happened over there was brutal. And I want you to get help. Because she sees him. He's going down fast.
He's struggling. Yeah,
he's in
struggling.
a tailspin big time. Because he's drinking more. He's moody. He's distracted. He keeps having flashbacks. I mean, that is not a good combination. And she's like, Jack,
Nope,
you're hurting.
it is not.
And he's like, I'm not, really. At least he doesn't call it. He goes, I'm wallowing. That's what I'm doing. He goes, I need to move on, so I don't think talking about it is going to help. And she's like, that's not healthy, pointing to the alcohol that he's drinking. He's like, this? He goes, so you think I have a problem? Is that it? And she kind of just looks at him like, he goes, look, it just takes the edge off. That's all. Now he finishes his second drink and he's going for a third. And she's like, look, I'm not judging you.
And he had several.
Oh, yeah. How much he kept drinking beer all day at the thing. I mean, that he was just drinking all day.
Exactly.
And if you actually think back of how much he drinks and when he drinks, it's actually, the first time you watch the show through, you don't really pay much attention. But once you get to this point where you're like, oh, wait, is he drinking a lot? Does he have a problem? And then if you go back and watch it again, you actually notice every time he feels stressed, every time he's had a good day or a bad day, it's always alcohol. And it's not just like a beer. Usually it's the hard stuff. He goes for 2 fingers of the hard stuff.
Yeah. It's like, remember when they were picking up the bed?
Yep. Just a little nip there. And she's like, I love you. She's like, I just hate seeing you in pain. And he's like, I love you too. He brings the bottle with him and the glass. And he's like, tomorrow it's going to be better. I promise. And he takes the bottle and the glass and he grabs a jacket and he goes to sit outside. He goes, I'll be outside. Like, he just does not want to talk about this.
How is this? I know. And
Running
how is this supposed to help?
Running away.
Mm-hmm.
So we have Brady, and I think he's at that other bar, that other biker bar, and he's coming out, getting on his bike, and these 2 big trucks pull up. Calvin and Jimmy and some of the other guys. Hold on, I missed what he said.
Just what he needs.
Right? And he sees him coming, he shakes his head like, great, now I got to deal with this guy. And he's like, you're late. You said 4. Oh, he's at Emerald Lumber. Okay, that's where he is. So we see Brady. He's at the office at Emerald Lumber. It's dark out now. Remember, he was supposed to meet Calvin. Calvin said be there at 4 o'clock. These trucks roll up, so clearly it's dark. It's way after 4 o'clock. And Brady's like, you're late. You said 4 o'clock. And Calvin's like, yeah, it's no fun waiting around for something you need, is it? Like he's trying to teach him a lesson. He goes, look, the only reason I'm here is to let you know that if you even so much as talk to Bree, the next body you pull out of the woods will be yours. And Calvin turns around and chuckles at him, and he goes, easy, cowboy. Walks back over to him. He goes, you don't need to get so uptight. He's like, hear me out. That raid took a big bite out of your profits. It's time to refill the coffers. Brady just looks pissed. He's like, I need you to help me keep up appearances. And Brady's kind of shaking his head no. And he goes, so from 7 to 5, it's business as usual. That's you. And he's like, then my boys will come in and work the night shift. We got a fresh shipment of fentanyl coming in next week. And Brady's like, that was fast. He goes, well, you know what they say, time is money. He goes, so are you in? He goes, or do I need to put you back in the pen? And Brady's like, you stay away from Bree and we got a deal. And Calvin kind of looks at him and he's like, ain't love grand. Gives him a wink and he walks away. So he really didn't agree to it. But now Jack is sitting outside of the cabin where the chairs are and the fire pit with his drink, another drink, and he pulls the letter out that Lonergan had written to his parents. And it says, "Dear Mom and Dad, I'm writing you from the barracks at FOB Courage in Mosul." And it shows a flashback of Lonergan writing this letter. And he goes, "Where our company has been stationed for the last 3 days." He goes, "There's so much sand and dust, I feel like a dustbuster. They switched me to a new unit. The first sergeant, Jack Sheridan." Oh, sorry. They keep running the words together.
Okay.
"They switched me to a new fire team. The first sergeant, Jack Sheridan, has the most disciplined and decorated team in the whole unit. When he talks, everybody listens because they trust him. They don't want to let him down, and I know whatever happens, he's got our backs." And Jack is reading this, and he's crying. He goes, "I thought I made a mistake joining up, but now I know I made the right decision. I have First Sergeant Jack Sheridan to thank for that." And then one of the guys peeks into the tent where he's writing his letter. He goes, "Shake a tail feather, 43rd needs your help, let's go." So he's got to hurry up and end his letter. And he's like, "Yes, First Sergeant." And he's like, "I got to run. Say hi to the Tim man for me. I miss you and love you, Chris." And he signs his letter. And Jack is reading this letter, and he is just in tears. Like, he
so sad.
realizes that how much Chris respected him. And he takes the letter and he puts it in the fire. Like, he can't even deal with it. And he pours himself another drink. As he's that's a big one too.
So sad.
As he's crying.
Yeah.
With a very somber song.
And he's in so much pain. Yeah, he's in so much pain.
Well, it's like he feels so responsible for his death. I mean, it couldn't have been helped. I mean, his whole team, only one person died, which is probably amazing considering how many people probably did die in that battle with everything that was going on. Because the flashbacks that they show, I mean, there's a lot of shooting, a lot of explosions. I mean, it's shocking. Only, some people got hurt and only one person died. It's just crazy. But, he, no matter what, he feels responsible. So then they show Mel, and Mel's sleeping, and she starts like wincing, and like it wakes her up, and she's holding her stomach. And of course, what's the first thing you think? Is she having a miscarriage? She's having pain. And she leans over to tell Jack, who should be lying next to her asleep, and he's not there. And he's not been there. And she's yelling, "Jack!" And she's wincing. She sits up in bed, and she's like, "Ow." And now she's kind of looking very nervous, and she grabs her phone because she doesn't want to get up and search for Jack right now. She needs help right now. She gets on her phone, and she calls Doc. And Doc is like, "Mel?" And she's like, "Doc?" She's like, "I think there's something wrong with my baby." Now, keep in mind, nobody knows she's pregnant except for the doctor, of course, and Jack and Mel.
Yep. Now Vernon knows that she's pregnant.
Well, and Vernon, it's like baptism by fire. He finds out she's pregnant, and he's got to deal with it. So there you go.
Yeah.
Wow. Another cliffhanger, because, we can't just end it. And Jack's probably
Jack's ass is grass.
Yeah, he's probably passed out.
Passed out somewhere.
Yep, passed out.
He's passed out somewhere.
He's outside drinking his troubles away, probably sound asleep, snoring in the chair by the fire. Ugh, he is not handling his business very well at all.
And this is going to push Mel over the edge as well.
Well, I mean, it's like she does give some leeway for the PTSD and everything, but when you're just not handling it, it's one thing if he was dealing with it, but he's not dealing with it.
Yep.
He's, what do they call that? He's self-medicating.
In denial.
In denial.
True.
Yeah, he thinks he's fine.
In denial.
He's not fine. He's clearly not fine.
Nope.
And his alcohol intake has increased significantly over the last, whatever it was, couple weeks.
Yeah.
So if this doesn't get figured out soon, that will become a much, much bigger problem. And I mean, now that they have a baby on the way, he needs to get it together.
He needs to get his shit together.
Yeah, this is not good. This is not good. And you know what? She's going to do what's best for her and the baby, whatever that is. I mean, obviously she's going to support
Yeah.
him. She loves him. She's going to take care of him, but now there's not just her to think about. And so where is that going to take us? Very interesting. So stay tuned. We will see where it goes.
Yeah, we will.
Oh my gosh. We have to get through all the hard times before we can have some more happy ones. Why are their hard times so hard? I mean, they haven't these two been through enough? Like, seriously.
Oh, no. They're going to throw them through the ringer, girlfriend.
Oh my gosh.
Throw them through the ringer.
Seriously. Ugh, enough already. So, anyway, well, there we go. I guess we'll have to stay tuned for the next episode to find out what happens. How much of an ass is Jack? Right? Oh my gosh. Well, I guess the cat will be out of the bag with the baby because at least Doc will know.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
but let's hope she's okay. Yep. Goodness. Oh my. All right. Well, thanks again, Gigi.
Okay, folks.
For another fun episode.
Au revoir, my friend.
We'll be back next time for another episode of Virgin River Cafe Rewatch Podcast. Bye-bye.